And before handing off to my colleague, Dr. Lucas Alexandrovich, which I'll do in just a moment, I'd just like to cover a few points um, around housekeeping items, as well as a few other notes. So firstly, a lot of the information we'll be discussing today on the webinar is available on our website, and the English language website is www.homegrownchallenge.ca. So we will recapitulate some of the information that is on the website. However, I think the objective of today's webinar is really to try to provide a little bit more nuance than maybe one can glean from the website, and indeed try to provide a little bit of context, including the background and the impetus for this initiative, which was launched on February 8th. I'd also like to just let you know that we have set this webinar up in Teams, but we're using the webinar feature. So you won't be able to use your microphone. And I think we can see some of you through your cameras, but that function may or may not be turned off. If you do have questions, and we hope you do, please enter those in the chat box, and we'll try to get to those questions at the end of the webinar. The other point I would like to mention is that this webinar is being recorded today, and we're hoping to, at the very least, post the presentation which we'll be going through, and we'll post that in both English and French on our Homegrown Innovation website. So you can look for that in the coming days if you want to refresh your memory on anything we've discussed today. Okay, with that, I'll launch right into the agenda. You'll see we're going to start very briefly with some introductions. Then I will speak just a bit of light overview of the background for this innovation challenge and for its impetus in the view of the Weston Family Foundation. We'll cover challenge structure and key dates. We'll talk about eligibility, both in terms of applicants for the challenge, as well as eligible crops, or more specifically, eligible berries, and why we've set the eligibility criteria in the way we have. We'll also go into a little bit about what we're looking for, and how proposals will be assessed and who will undertake that assessment. Then we've got a few frequently asked questions that we've been receiving. We're going to address those straight up in section 6. And then at the end of this webinar, we'll get into that live Q&A, where any questions that you forwarded in advance of the webinar or that you forward during the webinar, we'll try to address those. So we have booked off 2 hours for this webinar. I think we'll end up presenting for 30-40 minutes, and then we'll see. We'll stick around as long as it takes to get through all of those germane questions and answers. Okay. So I'd like just to introduce the core team for this Weston Family Foundation Homegrown Innovation Challenge. As I said, my name is Dr. Jeff Kuhl. I'm head of strategic initiatives here at the Weston Family Foundation, and I've been working on this challenge really since the beginning, and that goes back to early 2020. I'm joined today by my colleague, Dr. Lucas Alexandrovich, from whom you'll be hearing in a moment, who is the program manager for the Homegrown Innovation Challenge. See the slides that from time to time will refer to the Homegrown Innovation Challenge as HGC. And the third member of the core team here at the Weston Family Foundation that supports the Homegrown Innovation Challenge is Emma Carey, who is our program coordinator, and in large part dedicated to the conduct of this challenge. You'll see, I think an important point we wanted to make is this internal team here really isn't involved in decision making around the challenge. Our role is more design and now implementation and coordination. We have a separate and external judging panel, which by and large makes the funding recommendations and will adjudicate proposals that come in. We'll be announcing that judging panel very soon. We've just recently made final selections, and I can tell you it's really a tremendous group with significant international expertise. So look for that on the website in the coming weeks. But I thought it was important to mention that the difference between our respective responsibilities. The team here at the Weston Family Foundation is very much here to assist you, to provide guidance. It's very much our objective to see as many high quality applications come forward as is possible. So we're here to a certain degree and reasonable degree provide advice. Certainly, we're here to help you identify partners and collaborators if that's something you need. We'll come back to that point. And as I said, all of the adjudication will be undertaken by third parties outside of the foundation. If you do want to get in touch with us, please, the best way to do it is just email through challenge@westonfoundation.ca, and that'll get to the right person. So I'll move forward, and again, the last slide I'll speak to is the next one, and that really is just to give you some sense of where this challenge came from, and I guess to some extent what we're hoping to achieve with this $33 million innovation challenge. So as I said, it was really early 2020, really in the early days of the pandemic, that the Weston Family Foundation, the board of the Weston Family Foundation, made the decision that we wanted to do something big. We wanted to do something that would produce positive systemic change from coast to coast in Canada, something that would be relevant to all Canadians, something that would lift the spirits and the fortunes of Canadians. And there was quite a lot of consultation that we conducted, and ultimately we landed on fruits and vegetables. Why? Well, I addressed that a little bit in this slide. Through all the consultations that we conducted through this very significant deliberative process, we came to the realization that Canada is really not unlike other countries, but particularly reliant on open borders for the 80% of fresh produce that we import and consume. And that, of course, we're very dependent on the production yields of foreign entities that produce that fresh produce for us. So if these foreign entities, for example, were to encounter some of the adverse effects of climate change, if their production yields were to drop, we would be in trouble in this country to a significant degree. We also became familiar with the high costs to produce fruits and vegetables in this country, particularly out of season. And we came to the understanding that for many producers, domestic producers, it's difficult to compete with foreign producers that can take advantage of natural energy, for example, to produce fresh fruits and vegetables, which then they can export into countries like Canada. Although this initiative is not meant to be reactive to the pandemic. I would certainly say that in our view, the COVID-19 pandemic was a wake-up call. And we've certainly all witnessed and experienced some issues with supply chains, but it also made us start to think about the risk of prolonged border closures, for example, which could also affect the ability of temporary foreign workers to get into the country. So certainly it was a trigger, but I don't think this program is meant to be a direct response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The last point I'll make, which I think is an important one, is we do think there's a problem here that needs to be addressed, but perhaps more importantly, we think there's a significant opportunity for Canada. We think that with our abundant natural resources, our permissive policy environment, really a climate of innovation excellence in the country, for so many reasons, we're very well positioned to lead the world in technology development in this area. We think Canadians and Canada is very well positioned to solve the problem for ourselves, but also for other countries that happen to be in the same spot that we're in. And so we're very eager to do what we can to enable Canadian innovators, Canadian producers, researchers, et cetera, to get ahead of this and become world experts and world leaders in this field. And so that is another major objective for this Homegrown Innovation Challenge. You know, in terms of the difference between maybe a problem and an opportunity, as Lucas will discuss, we know what the solution here is, and we articulate that in our challenge statement. What we don't know is the best way to achieve uh, that goal. And that's why we think a challenge statement, excuse me, a challenge prize makes so much sense. The idea that we just set up the target out there and we let the community decide what the best way to achieve that is. So as Lucas will mention, there are very few limitations on how an applicant, how a grantee can address this. We just, our hope is just that someone will address this challenge statement and really lead in many ways a revolution on how food is produced in this country. With that, I'll stop and I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Lucas Alexandrovich, who's sitting beside me, and he'll be taking you through the following slides on more details on the challenge itself. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks very much, Jeff. Hi, everyone. I'll talk a little bit more about the structure of the challenge and the eligibility, and I'll jump right in where Jeff left off on the challenge statement. And I guess first things first, it's important to highlight this statement because it's the overall goal that's driving the challenge and what we're hoping to achieve. And there's two things I wanted to emphasize about this. The first is the nuance within it, because it's a very defined statement and the terms within it were chosen very carefully. So in essence, the challenge statement asks us to create and deliver a market-ready system to reliably, sustainably, and competitively produce berries out of season and at scale in Canada. And I'll explain a little bit about some of the specific terms within that, because I think it'd be important to note those as you think about the ideas you want to put forward. You know, at essence, what we're looking for is a growing system for berries. But I think importantly as well, we want to be market ready so that the solution is ready to commercialize at the end of this challenge and that it has real world impact, you know, right at the end of the challenge as we finish the program. Reliability, that it needs to be tested and trusted so that businesses and growers can invest in it. It needs to be sustainable, so it needs to kind of stack up competitively against the current environmental footprints we experience from similar systems, and hopefully improve on those. It needs to be competitive, so it needs to be able to be adopted at scale and at a competitive price point for end users. Of course, the terms about out of season, which is really the crux of the challenge, is to extend that growing season and reduce our reliance on imported fruit and veg, and of course at scale, so that the technology, that the ideas have been tested at a farm scale and not just in a lab or in a small niche setting. And I think the second point too is kind of what Jeff mentioned too about the simplicity of this. So we know where we want to get to, not necessarily how we get there, and that means that the solution field is quite open. And it's up to innovators to propose what solutions get us there. And we've had a number of questions already about, whether this idea or this technology is relevant. And all we would say to that is that if you think that your idea advances this challenge statement and gets us closer to that goal, then it's absolutely in scope. So that can involve anything from, improved genetic varieties of berries to, improved disease management, better controlled environments, robotics or novel sources of energy use. It's all in scope if it gets us closer to that challenge statement. And so in terms of the structure of the prize, so the program runs over 6 years and it has 4 funding rounds over that time. Broadly, there's 3 application rounds, which are the Spark, the Shepherd, and Scaling, which I'll go through in a minute. And these are rounds that provide grants for teams to, use that money and build out their system, their growing system, and test it. And the 4th round is an award. So that's an award at the end of the challenge, which will enable us to, award the most innovative teams and the ones that get us closest to the overall challenge statement. So in terms of each of the individual stages, the first one is the Spark Award. You'll see that one's due quite soon on May 3rd. And that provides $50,000. We'll provide that to up to 15 teams, but that's really money to get teams ready for the Shepherd phase application, which is a bit more detailed. So essentially supporting teams to further flesh out and develop their idea, get the appropriate partners on board and the right expertise that you would need in team members, and any other activities that would help teams prepare the more technical documentation that we'll need in the shepherd phase. And that would last for about 6 months, right up until the deadline for the applications for the shepherd phase. Then comes the shepherd phase. So for that funding round, we'll be giving out 10 $1 million awards. And those are really to basically help you build out and trial your technology at a small scale. So in a lab setting or in a greenhouse, and importantly, show that it works. Teams would have 18 months to do that, to conduct that work. And at the end of that, they'd be considered for a scaling phase, and that would be in September 2024. So the scaling phase awards would then provide up to $5 million, and that would be used for taking that technology that was developed in the shepherd phase, scaling it up, and demonstrating that it then works at a wider scale, so at a farm level. And also importantly, showing that it has some promise and some applicability to other crops as well. And teams within this phase would have 36 months to conduct that work and demonstrate that work. And then in early 2028, we'll be giving out 2 awards of $1 million each. So those would be based on one award would be kind of an overall award, so rewarding teams that got as close to that challenge statement as possible. And another would just be focused only on the novelty of the technology and technological breakthroughs, in which team has achieved the most in that regard. The important thing to note is that the process locks in after the shepherd phase. So the Spark Awards are fully open to applicants. The shepherd phase is also open to applications, but after that point, when we award the shepherd phase awards, the scaling phase awards would only then be given to those teams that have already received a shepherd phase award, and then subsequently the final awards would only be given to the teams that already hold a scaling phase award. But again, so the Spark Awards and the shepherd phase awards are fully open. And you don't need to have applied for a Spark Award to also apply for a Shepherd Award. So if you're not ready, or if you don't need that initial Spark Award funding, you can just wait until the Shepherd phase applications are due in December this year and apply then. Or similarly, if you do apply for a Spark Award and don't receive that, we hope you're not dismayed, and you can still apply for the Shepherd phase, the much bigger round of funding. And you'll see that the structure of the challenge over the 6 years is a pretty comprehensive pipeline that supports teams to go from, right from ideation all the way to scaling up. And we thought about too the amount of funding and the timing needed to really let teams, dig in, invest, trial and work through their solutions, and at the end, scale up and think about commercialization as well. And each of these phases also, to note, would have a TRL, so technology readiness level associated with them. So for example, at the end of the Spark phase, when the Spark Awards are finishing, when you're getting ready to apply to the Shepherd phase, we hope that your idea, your innovation would be at TRL 2. At the end of the Shepherd phase, when we're considering teams to get funding for scaling phase, that the innovation, that the ideas are at TRL 5 at that point. And then at the very end of the challenge, when we're considering the final awards, that the technology and innovations are at TRL level 8 and beyond. So those details are on our website. Definitions of the different TRL levels are also on the website, and you can find them there. So given the structure of the program, I'll now talk a little bit more about who's eligible to apply. So a major consideration of the program is that we, as the Weston Family Foundation, a registered charity, can only directly provide funding to qualified donees. And this is an obligation we have under the Canada Revenue Agency. The guidelines for who a qualified donee is are posted online. They're on the CRA website, and there's a relatively useful guide there. But essentially, there's kind of 10 categories of qualified donees. I think the most useful ones, but not exclusively so to this challenge, would probably be registered charities, including colleges, universities, municipalities, as well as other public bodies. But there's a much wider list. And of course, any of those could be applicable as well as a qualified donee. However, we do appreciate that innovation would probably be best served by having a diverse team of stakeholders on board, which it would include industry, for-profit entities, startups, growers, and farmers themselves. So in that regard, those stakeholders are able to join a team. They're able to participate. They just cannot be the lead applicant that is applying for funding directly from us. So in terms of what that looks like when it comes to an application, those stakeholders can be grouped into three kind of categories in terms of our application process. There would be the principal applicant, so that's the person who is putting together that application form and submitting it to us. That would be the person who is leading the overall effort and is responsible for designing and implementing the work. And the principal applicant would have to be a qualified donee, and their organization would have to be based in Canada. Alongside this, if there's other team members, they can also then be co-applicants or collaborators. A co-applicant similarly would have overall management responsibility. They'd also be involved in designing and implementing the work, and a co-applicant would also need to be a qualified donee. And lastly, collaborator can be someone who substantially inputs into the project, but is not responsible for the overall leadership. But a collaborator can be based anywhere in the world and does not necessarily have to be a qualified donee. So hopefully that's helpful to think about, who can join, who's eligible to join, and how to structure that team. Now, having said that, we know it's not always easy to build out a team, especially if you're, working outside of your sector or the focus area that you're most comfortable with. And in that regard, we're happy to support teams coming together. We're happy to support applicants, looking for other team members throughout the process of the challenge. We're going to be thinking about different mechanisms to help facilitate that, and we're still developing those. And I'd say in the meantime, if you are having any issues or you would like some help with that, I think it's easiest just to message or to email us directly, and we can see what we can do. That's going to be a bit of capacity building and support that we do hope to provide over the course of the challenges, is that matchmaking and helping you find the right partners that you need to carry out your work. So you may be asking also, why berries? And there's a number of reasons for this, but I think the first point I'd like to make is that in the challenge, berries are really a means to an end. And we're thinking that, if we can solve some of these technical barriers to growing berries out of season, we can also help translate and apply those innovations, those ideas to other crops as well. Going back to that bigger goal of that Jeff mentioned of, increasing food security and resilience of Canadians. Beyond that, we did think it was also important to focus on a single crop just to help facilitate that challenge prize process, to provide a defined outcome for innovators to focus on, and also be able to have kind of a standardized outcome, a standardized thing that we're comparing and assessing applications and ideas on. But berries were also an ideal crop for a number of reasons. Among others, they're popular. They're popular with consumers. There's a high demand for them. And we also experience a large trade deficit, specifically in Canada. We import a lot of berries, 80% of what we eat in Canada. So I think that's ripe for change and improvement. Berries are also highly nutritious. They have a very good nutritional profile. And they're also valuable, meaning that there's a margin there. Consumers are happy to pay a little bit of a premium, and growers can receive some of that as a margin on their growing systems. As you mentioned, we also think that the way berries are grown they're grown in systems where, where if we can apply innovations and technology to that system, that would also be transferable to other crops as well. And beyond that, we think they're kind of what we call an innovation sweet spot, in terms of some work has already been done in this regard. We know of a couple operations where berries are already grown year-round in Canada. But there's a lot more that can be done in this space to improve yields, reduce the price, reduce the environmental footprints. So there's a ways to go, and a lot that can still be innovated upon and improved upon. The list of berries that we have that are eligible for the prize is quite wide. So it's all the popular varieties you'd think of and you'd encounter in supermarkets, as well as lesser known varieties that are native to different regions and parts of Canada. And we have that list on our website. If you are thinking about a berry that's not on that list, we do have a number of inclusion criteria and exclusion criteria to think through. Really, the first is that, as we mentioned, that growing system for that berry of choice is transferable to other fruits and vegetables as well, and that you can make a justification to the cultural and culinary importance of that berry in Canada. Also, in a more technical sense, we would not be considering fruit that's derived from annual plants, that's derived from trees, that's not primarily intended as a food. So, for example, being used as an input into another process or the creation of another good. And also any fruit that has an atypical growing approach. I think under this, we're thinking cranberry specifically. And so guiding us throughout the 6 years and the different funding rounds is a set of criteria that we'll be using to score and judge applications against. And there's 6 of these, which I'll go through. The first is impact, which is really asking about, can that solution deliver on that overall challenge statement comprehensively? We'll be looking at the technological achievement, so thinking about how novel and how innovative is the technological aspect of what's being proposed. We'll be looking at team capability, so thinking about, does the overall team have the required skills to deliver on that technology, on that idea? Also looking at commercial viability, so thinking about, can the solution thrive in the market in regards to both consumers and end users of the technology. We'll be thinking about environmental sustainability. So what are the environmental footprints, and do they improve on the current standard practices, for that berry variety? And lastly, a criterion that would just be applied to that first spark phase would be the need for the spark award. So given that the spark award is a bit of funding to really get ready and set for the shepherd phase application, a question about what you would do with that seed funding, how it would enable you to fill in any gaps and get ready for the shepherd phase. And as you'll see, the weighting also changes a little bit over the course of the challenge. So for example, as we go through, as we go through the pipeline, we'd be thinking a little bit less about team capability, because that team would have already been built out and proven themselves, and we'll be thinking more about commercialization. So do bear in mind some of the weighting and how that changes over time. And in the last assessment round, which is the where we select the 2 overall winners, as I mentioned, one of those prizes would be awarded to the team that overall gets as close to that challenge statement as possible. So we'd be looking at all of the criteria to assess that. And another one of the final prizes would be awarded to a team that just displays the highest level of innovation and novelty in their technological innovation. So that award would just be based on the technological innovation component. So now we're going to roll straight through into frequently asked questions, and some of the questions we've already been getting over the process. And I'll go through a number of the major ones we've received so far. Also, just a reminder at this point, if you can start putting in your questions in the chat box, and then we can start answering those live after this, this section has finished. So one of the first questions we've been getting to is how is Loblaws involved in this initiative? And the simple answer is it's not. So the foundation and our goals, and specifically the Homegrown Innovation Challenge, is completely separate to the operating businesses that fund our foundation. So there's no link. We're not looking for any solutions that would be, appropriate or attractive to Loblaws. Nothing like that. We're really focusing on just that challenge statement as it supports growing systems for berries and extending the growing season. So those are two separate things. Another question has been, must an entity be a qualified donee to submit an application as a principal applicant? And this is yes. This is one of the core restrictions we have, is that the primary applicant has to be a qualified donee, and our funding has to go to a qualified donee. Another is any match funding required? The answer is no, not necessarily. We're not looking for any match funding from other sources, from other, say, funders, or from resources that a team or company would already have. It could be a bonus. Some of the criteria do ask about, what's been developed so far, what skills and resources and equipment are you bringing to this challenge. So it could be looked upon favorably, but it's definitely not a requirement for the application. Another is, will Weston Family Foundation officials review written proposals prior to the submission deadline? We do offer some support to applicants. We will not be kind of commenting or providing any written feedback, but we can offer a phone conversation just to chat through idea and kind of sense check and contextualize whether it's in scope, and any other general questions you might have. Another question has been, how important is it that an innovation team has prior experience with the production of berries? And prior experience with berries is not required necessarily. Going back to one of the fundamentals of this is that we're looking for innovations and technology that can be applied to berries, but also to other crops as well. So vice versa, you could have teams that have been looking at other crops already and would like to apply that to berries. But we're really focused on solving some of those barriers to growing and to production as applied to berries. So in that sense, of course, it would be beneficial to some extent to be able to produce that system, implement it, trial it, but previous experience with berries is not necessarily required. Another question has been, are open field production systems eligible? The answer is yes. As we mentioned, the solution space is quite open. As long as teams are thinking about innovations and ideas that get us closer to that challenge statement, that outcome, then anything is really in scope. Any type of idea that gets us closer to that challenge statement is in scope. Another question has been, is there any technology that is not relevant to or eligible for the HGC? Again, I would refer to that challenge statement and thinking about, really we're focusing on the production side, so growing food, not necessarily the later stages in the food supply chain. But again, the North Star in this is that challenge statement, and thinking about what technology would enable us to better produce berries. And lastly, how does one submit an application to the Homegrown Innovation Challenge? So there are two routes in terms of we're offering a submission in both English and French. On the French side, we have a form that you can download. It's a downloadable, fillable PDF form that you could fill out and submit back to us via email, and that's available on the French site. And on the English side, we have a dedicated online platform through which you apply. That platform is called Smart Simple. Some might be familiar with it already. And the link to that platform will be available on our website by the end of today. So that should be ready and live for anyone who would like to start.
Well, great. Well, thank you very much, Lucas, for that overview. I think we're more or less right on schedule. At this point, we'd like to move to the live Q&A. So as Lucas said, if you have questions that you came to the webinar with or that have arisen in your mind as you've listened to Lucas today or myself, please pop those into the chat box now, and we'll try to get to as many as we are able to do. As I said as well, if you did miss something in the presentation today, please, as I said at the outset of the webinar, we will be posting the presentation both in English and French on the webinar on the website in the coming days. So please look for that there. Okay. So I am going to move now to the specific questions that you have posed, and I will initially play the role of questioner, and I'll be posing these to my colleague, Lucas, who will provide an answer. So I'm going to start with one that came in before the webinar started, and I'll read it as follows. We are a SaaS technology company focused on developing software tools for growers. We're based in Ontario, but our team spans Canada. We'd like to know how we can get involved from a technology perspective to help Canadian growers. So how would you respond to that question, Lucas?
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, we'd absolutely encourage you to get involved. I think one of the main considerations would be how you can partner with a qualified donee. But in terms of whether the question is whether your specific technology is eligible for this, I think again going back to the challenge statement, focusing on whether it supports the outcome of that challenge statement is important to consider. But otherwise, we would welcome diverse and multi-stakeholder teams in applying. So I think it would really be a question of how to find the right partners to engage in the process with. And that's something we're happy to help with. And I think something we can also probably take offline if you want to email us about that, and we can see what we can do.
Great, thanks, Lucas. Next question. Is a university team comprised of students and or faculty eligible to apply, or is a partnership with a business necessary?
So we have no restrictions on what a team looks like other than the principal applicant being a qualified donee. We would encourage multi-stakeholder teams to apply, but that depends on kind of where your technology is, where your innovation idea is. If you don't require expertise outside of your team, if you don't require any sort of new technological inputs outside of your team, then you don't necessarily need to partner with anyone else. Yeah, that's probably all I'll say on that.
Just mute your mic. Okay, speaking of qualified donees, we've had a lot of questions about principal applicants and who can be a qualified donee. One of the other questions that came in, we've received a few times that I don't think you fully addressed in your presentation, Lucas, is about whether an entity can make an application without being a qualified donee, with the understanding that they maybe are in the process of applying to become a qualified donee and would be a qualified donee by the time that the funds would flow. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Put simply, the applicant would need to be a qualified donee at the time that the application is submitted to us.
Great, thank you. Another question around the Spark Award in particular. Can you speak to, in a general sense, as to eligible expenses and whether that can be used for institutional overhead?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, we do allow overheads, and that's a figure of up to 10% of the grant. Of course, that would be included in the total of 50,000, so it wouldn't be on top of the 50,000. But we do allow overheads and other justifiable costs that are linked to the activities undertaken in the Spark Award.
Great. Another question that came in during the course of the webinar, is more than one organization able to partner for a single solution, Lucas?
Yeah, absolutely. So that goes back to the multi-stakeholder teams and helping put those together. And they're absolutely encouraged to yeah, we absolutely encourage multiple partners to come together on a single solution, on a single application.
Great, thank you. We've had several questions about why berries and why berries versus other categories of crops, for example. Maybe what I'll just say before handing off to Lucas is, you know, we did undertake quite a significant process to research different options, look at different types of categories, different types of individual crops. Maybe Lucas, you could just reiterate the major reason why we focused on berries, and again, and I think emphasize maybe the point about it being a means to an end. But just before you get there, I know there was a specific question about brassica. Indeed, we actually considered cruciferous crops and quite significantly. I think ultimately. One of the reasons we selected berries is we thought it would be difficult to compete at a price level with foreign exporters. But again, what I will say is that we're not experts on these topics here internally. We had an advisory group, but indeed we're building a judging panel that provides that expertise. So we won't be able to provide much more than that. But again, Lucas, maybe you can just kind of reiterate that point about why berries, and because it's a question that comes up a lot.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So my understanding is that when the decision was made to focus on a single crop, there was a question then on, well, what crop do we focus on? And to help guide that, there were a number of different indicators and criteria that were used, including the health profile, the healthiness of that crop, the trade deficit that we experience. Are we highly reliant on imports for that crop? Um, the consumer demand and popularity of that, the value to growers in terms of the premium that growers can achieve from it, as well as looking at kind of more widely, what is the innovation space for that crop look like? Have there already been efforts and investments in this space? So for example, for leafy greens, there's quite a bit going on already in producing them. So that wasn't a preferred candidate, but yeah, a number of criteria were used to get to berries.
Great, thanks. We also, from time to time, get questions about intellectual property and how this is managed and how what the arrangement should look like among different participants in an innovation team. Maybe this is one I can just address before handing off to Lucas. The Weston Family Foundation doesn't seek any rights, I think, as you understand, in any innovations, any intellectual property that may arise through the Homegrown Innovation Challenge, and nor do we seek to influence how that intellectual property is assigned or vested whatsoever. I think the only, and I would encourage you to refer to the terms and conditions on the website for more information in this area. The one exception to that point is around ensuring benefits to Canada. And we do have certain provisions to make sure that Canada and Canadians can promptly benefit from the food products that result from any production system that is invented and scaled up through the course of the Homegrown Innovation Challenge. But other than that, the way you set up intellectual property sharing arrangements, to whom rights are assigned, how you structure non-disclosure agreements, we leave that really to your discretion. We don't get involved with that kind of thing. Anything you wanted to add to that, Lucas?
No, that was a pretty comprehensive answer. Thanks, Jeff.
Okay. Next question. Is there any way, Lucas, for applicants to collaborate before submitting? The example that came in is that we're a 100% Canadian agri-tech software company, and we could not be a principal applicant, but we well positioned to be a collaborator on a project. How would we get our name out to potential applicants to see how we could help them? Great question.
Yeah, no, that is a great question. So as I mentioned, we're going to be thinking about some mechanisms where we can help do this over the course of this year, really, for applications for Spark and Shepherd. I think in the first instance, it's probably best to just email us, and then we can see how we can support. But yeah, we're going to be happy to help put you in touch with other relevant teams.
And we're
Good.
getting toward the end of our list here. So again, if you do have questions, please take the opportunity now to pop them into the chat box so we can address them in this webinar. Let me move to the next one on my list. And this relates, I think, to the last question we had, Lucas. Can the WFF help with matchmaking? I have patented a design that certainly addresses the challenge statement, but I'm alone, need a team, and am not an eligible or qualified donee. So how are we going to undertake that, Lucas?
Again, same answer. I think in the first instance, do connect with us, email us, and we'll see how we can help you overcome that.
Great, thank you. A question on scale. 1, 2, 3+ acres at one site, number of sites across Canada. I don't think we really have, I don't think we really define that, Lucas, but how would you respond?
The only definitions are that are for the Shepherd Phase Awards. We're just looking for a small scale, basically proof of concept, a trial. That could be in a lab or in a kind of small greenhouse, for example. And the scaling phase would then ask you to scale that up and demonstrate that at a larger scale. So this would be at the equivalent of a farm level. Otherwise, we don't have any strict definition or criteria on acreage or size and what that looks like specifically.
Okay, we have in the past received a number of questions about preservation techniques, and the next question I think falls into that category. Would you consider innovation which can rescue fruits or vegetables, including berries, which would keep their nutrient value in a powder form and extend the shelf life for a prolonged period of time? Lucas?
So I'd just refer back to the challenge statement, which specifies we're looking for growing systems, not necessarily anything further along in that supply chain. However, if you think that your idea can help somehow advance that growing aspect in that challenge statement, then do think about how can it be applied. But yeah, I would keep the challenge statement and that specific outcome in mind as you're thinking about your idea and whether it's relevant.
The next entry in the chat log is not so much a question as a comment, and that is that building a team is a great idea. And certainly we agree. And we do think that solving this problem, addressing this challenge statement, will certainly require the formation of multidisciplinary teams. We don't believe that it really will be possible by at least a kind of a monolithic approach. So we very much encourage the formation of multidisciplinary teams that maybe involve producers and researchers and physicists and all manner of different people. And we've designed the challenge to foster the formation and ultimately success of these teams. Coming to the next question then, who has the rights to the information, or who owns the information when if the innovative idea becomes successful and begins scaling up? Lucas, I mean, I think this touches on the earlier question, and I think the simple answer is that we leave that to the teams to make that determination. We don't have a say on that. Would you agree?
Yep, absolutely. That's right.
Probably the most common question that we get is, are Canadian universities considered as qualified lead participants? Put another way, are Canadian universities qualified donees? Lucas?
Yes, the short answer is yes. So as you'll remember, there's under that CRA guidance, there's 10 different categories of organizations that are considered qualified donees. Within that, registered charities are an individual category, and within that, colleges and universities reside within that. If you do want to be sure, the CRA website is actually quite helpful, and it has a search feature. So within each of those 10 categories, you can look up specific institutions to see if they're actually if they've been registered as a qualified donee. But yes, colleges and universities would be qualified donees.
Great. And I do see in the chat box that people are already making connections and putting out pleas for partnerships. The other point I just wanted to make is, I think we've mentioned this already, we as an organization are very open and willing to try to facilitate that team building process. So again, if you're looking for team members, if you're looking to fill some holes, please do reach out and we'll do our best to play that matchmaking function. Another point I just wanted to make is we're actually working on software presently that we're hoping to upload to our website that will also facilitate that matchmaking process. So we're just ironing out a few kinks in it, but I'm hoping that that software, that application will be launched on our website in the coming days. So please keep your eyes open for that. Next question, is there a list of participants in this webinar so we can look at partnering with some? Lucas?
Sorry, do you mind repeating that one?
I think this person's looking for a list of participants in this webinar. And I think that unfortunately, I don't think we can share a list of participants in this webinar. Certainly we know who you are. So if you are interested, we'll keep track of who's participated, and if someone reaches out and is looking for skill sets that are represented on this webinar, we can try to point you in the right direction.
And just to add to that, going back, if this is kind of looking for partners and different stakeholders, do email us and we can see what we can do. And as Jeff mentioned, we are trying to work on some platforms to help facilitate this, the partnering and the matchmaking. I think it's possible for us to follow up to the participants of this meeting. So when we do get those established, we can send out an email to this list.
Okay, next question, Lucas. Can funds be applied to capital expenditures?
Yes. Yes, they can.
Okay. Next question. Do I understand correctly that you intend to value associated economic metrics such as competitive manufacturability in Canada when you score proposals / innovations?
Do you want to take that one, Jeff?
Well, I think all I would say in response, I would just point to the assessment criteria that Lucas articulated. I would also encourage you to look at some of the sub buckets around these criteria. I mean, I think the answer is by and large yes, without getting into the details. But please do look at the adjudication criteria, which we publish on our website. Okay, next question. We are an indoor farming startup focusing on year-round strawberry production. Qualified lead organizations interest. Oh, excuse me. This is just an effort to find partnerships. So for anyone who's listening, there is an indoor farming startup focused on year-round strawberry production in that's looking for partnerships. So if you're interested in that, please contact us and we can make the introduction, but I think you can also see some of this in the chat log yourself. Okay, would you please elaborate on what the Spark funds can be used for? But apologies if this information is already available on your website. I think we have talked a little bit about that today, Lucas, but maybe just speak to that again very quickly.
Yeah, for sure. So again, the Spark Award is really just funding and support to get teams ready for the Shepherd phase application, which requires more details on the technological plan, the technical plan, the business plan, and so forth. So any activity that would support you getting ready in terms of getting the right team together, the right team members, getting up to that TRL, the technology readiness level of 2, at the point of which you could apply at the Shepherd phase. Any activities that would support that would be in scope.
Well, I think we're coming to the end of the list of questions. If you feel like we've either missed your question or have not answered it adequately, please follow up. Please feel free to follow up with us. Again, the email address is challenge@westonfoundation.ca, and we'll try to get more information for you. I guess another question that just popped up, can you describe what you believe would constitute a very strong team? Lucas?
Again, so going back to that challenge statement and the different nuances we have in there about, producing berries out of season competitively, reducing the environmental footprints, thinking about the commercialization and being able to employ this at scale. I refer to those in terms of kind of thinking about what skills, what components of the system you would need to align with those criteria and those different components and metrics we're looking for. So it's hard to say who specifically should be on the team, but as Jeff mentioned, we think a really strong competitive team would probably consist of researchers, academics, growers, people that have experience growing berries, as well as new tech and innovation, and equipment that would be relevant to that solution, to that innovation. So really, again, I think multi-stakeholder teams would be quite competitively placed within the challenge.
Another question that's come in, Lucas, regarding qualified donees. To what extent does the qualified donee actually have to be involved in the project? Can a qualified donee really be there more just to kind of flow funds through to a non-qualified donee?
No, so the qualified donee does have to, they do have to be involved, principally involved, and align with those definitions we have of kind of leading the design and execution of the project. They can't just be a warm body on the application list.
What about, Lucas, berries that for one reason or another do not meet our selection criteria, but that a producer would argue are very relevant to a broad array of fruits and vegetables? I mean, is our list locked down, or is there any opportunity to rethink it? How would you address that?
Yeah, great question. So our list is locked down, and I would say if that that individual is already working on berries that aren't within our list, we'd encourage them to just take those technologies and ideas and to apply them to berries that are on our list.
I think, have we missed anything, Emma? Are there any questions that we haven't addressed? I think we're getting to the end, and so I think we'll wrap up shortly unless we start seeing more questions in the chat box. As I said, by no means is this your final opportunity to ask questions. We've talked about the website. There's a lot of information there. I also want to note that if you're interested, please do add your name to our distribution list. We have a function on the website where you can sign up to receive more information. And as I mentioned a few moments ago, we're hoping to launch a social media app that will be hosted on our website, on our Homegrown Challenge website, that will hopefully be useful to you and allow you to collaborate and continue some of the team building that seems to have started in the chat box today, which is just great and very heartening for us. I do see another question that just popped into the chat box, Lucas, from Amy. If work is currently being done to extend shelf life and season, is it eligible for the challenge affected? I'm not sure I understand the last part of that, but I guess the idea is if you have a technology that extends shelf life and season, is it eligible to be entered into the Homegrown Innovation Challenge?
Again, going back to that challenge statement, if that technology can be applied to the growing of berries and extending out of season production of berries, then by all means, yes.
And I'll just pause at this point to see if any other questions come into the chat box that we feel like we can address. You may see there may have been a few questions that I skipped over, and that was simply because I don't feel like we're well positioned here to answer those questions. So again, if you feel that your question was not answered at all or adequately answered, please feel free to follow up with us in writing. We'll try to get you an answer to your question. I guess another question maybe I'll just pose that's come into us before, Lucas, is around geographic location. I mean, do we have any view as to where this the innovation should take place, and are we seeking to do we have any kind of geographic preference in terms of how we distribute the funding in the Homegrown Innovation Challenge?
Yeah, thanks for raising that, Jeff. So actually there are some distinctions between the shepherd phase and the scaling phase. So actually there's a few kind of interlocking lines of thought here. So principal applicants must be based at least more than half their time in Canada. They must belong to a qualified donee organization that is based in Canada. However, within the shepherd phase, the work, as you'll remember, that's, the shepherd phase is really about building out a proof of concept, trialing it, demonstrating that it works. That can be done anywhere in the world. When we come back to the scaling phase and when we scale it out to a larger level, to a farm level, and show that it works, that work has to be done in Canada to show that it's applicable to our environment, our conditions, and that it works here. So there are some distinctions between geography, but yeah, overall in shepherd phase, the work can be done anywhere. In scaling phase, it has to be made relevant and demonstrated in Canada.
Absolutely. I was just reminded by one of my colleagues that we just to clarify that the Homegrown Innovation Challenge website is distinct from the Weston Family Foundation website. So again, if you are looking for information specific to the Homegrown Innovation Challenge, please check out homegrownchallenge.ca. Of course, there's lots of great information on the Weston Family Foundation's main website, which I'd also encourage you to check out. And we certainly do have some programs in agriculture as well as human health, and we support a lot of research in Canada's north as well. We do, one of the questions that's just come into the chat box, and it's something it's more of a general question that we've seen from others, is that we are a company that is already in this space. We're already looking at technology that's relevant to the challenge. Would we like to discuss it with this company and potentially help them partner with Canadian qualified donees? And I think the answer, Lucas, is absolutely yes, right?
Yeah, please do get in touch. We'll see what we can do and if we can help pair you with a qualified donee. If you had missed it, we are looking at building some social platforms to help facilitate this process, really. And when that's ready, we can share that. But for the time being, yeah, do just get in touch with us directly.
Another question just came in. If we are lucky enough to get a grant from the Homegrown Innovation Challenges, would the funds come from the Weston Family Foundation, and would the Weston Family Foundation be recognized as the donor?
I think the answer to that is yes. Yes, the Weston Family Foundation would be directly providing the grants.
Which of course is part of the reason why we can only provide funds to qualified donees, because as a private foundation, we're restricted by the Canada Revenue Agency to making donations strictly to those organizations defined as qualified donees. Any other questions that anybody wishes to ask presently? Oh, Well, we did have, again, we get this question so much, we may as well just answer it again briefly, Lucas, even though we've done that earlier in the webinar. Do you again just want to recapitulate why there's a focus on berries as opposed to other crops or categories of crops?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first one is a design choice to help with the challenge prize mechanism to have a kind of consistent and defined outcome that all teams can apply innovations towards. But in terms of why berries relative to other crops, there's a number of criteria we used, and we did consider other crops as well. But thinking about the trade deficit, to what extent do we have to import this crop? To what extent are we not able to currently grow it out of season in Canada? Thinking about the health profile, thinking about how popular the crop is with consumers, and a number of other things. But based on that deliberation, we came out with berries as being the right choice for this. I think the other thing we want to mention too is that berries are a means to an end. So we're hoping that by solving some of these barriers to producing berries out of season, whether it's energy or controlled environments or different open field methods, we can apply those to other crops as well. So conversely, if you are working on a different crop now, by all means, we'd ask you to think about if you can apply that to berry production and help us meet that challenge statement goal.
Great, thank you. I had another question about intellectual property. Is there information on the website about intellectual property ownership? Coming from Christy. Christy, I think the answer is that yes, there is information on ownership and a few provisions around that. So please do check out the terms and conditions on the website. I think there may also be a few FAQs about IP and technology rights more broadly. So yes, I'd encourage you to refer to homegrownchallenge.ca and the terms and conditions section for answers to any questions you may have about IP. Suffice it to say, the Weston Family Foundation doesn't take any rights in any intellectual property. And of course, I think it's, as you will know, obviously we don't take any equity ownership in any spin out or anything like that. This is strictly a grant made by a private foundation to a qualified donee. Also want to mention, just while we're on the topic of legalities, that we do have certain restrictions around conflicts of interest. So I would please encourage you to take, again, a look at that section of the terms and conditions and make sure you understand what we would consider to be a conflict of interest. And if you do have a conflict of interest, how you should go about disclosing that to the Weston Family Foundation.
While we're waiting, I just wanted to point out again, for anyone thinking about applying, and the two deadlines this year. So for the Spark Awards, the 50,000, those are due May 3rd, and the Shepherd Phase Awards for $1 million are due December 20th of this year. And just a reminder that applying for the first Spark Awards is not a prerequisite to also applying for Shepherd. So if you do get a Spark Award, if you do receive Spark funding, you'll still have to apply separately for Shepherd funding. If you don't apply for Spark, or if you do apply but don't receive it, you can still apply for Shepherd. So they're not contingent on each other.
Yeah, that's a great point. Question coming in from Angela, just to follow up, if we are not a qualified donee, we should still get in touch. And is the best way through challenge@westonfoundation.ca? I think the answers are yes and yes. We very much want producers involved. We want farmers to be involved. We want for-profit entities to be involved. The only restriction is we can only provide grants to qualified donees, but we do think there's an important role for non-qualified donees to play in this initiative, and we certainly would encourage you to get in touch such that we can try to partner you up with a qualified donee that has complementary expertise and experience. The other question that came in was around whether we've done these kinds of initiatives in the past, and the answer is actually no. Traditionally, the Weston Family Foundation has not been active in the food or innovation space. This is a new theme for us, and the whole challenge prize format's brand new for us. again, we decided to adopt this format for this very large initiative precisely because we knew what we wanted the solution to be. We just weren't sure of the best way to achieve that solution. And again, we've determined that that's where the innovation challenge or the challenge prize format makes so much sense. So this is very much a new format, a new thematic area for the foundation. And I will just give a shout out to our colleagues at Nesta in the UK, who are really the experts, the worldwide experts on innovation challenge. And Nesta, and in particular Andrea Richardson at Nesta, played a pivotal role in helping us to put this together and launch this Homegrown Innovation Challenge, which, as you know, just launched in on February 8th. This is a very new a challenge for us. Lucas, what would be the timeline for adjudication, and I guess what would how long will it take from the submission of Spark applications, if we can start there, and when the funding would actually be announced by the foundation?
Yeah, absolutely. So the deadline for Spark is May 3rd, and we're hoping by mid-June, so about 6 weeks from the application deadline, we'd have a decision on the final awards. And then for Shepherd 2, the timeline's slightly longer. Applications will be due December 20th, and we'd reserve up to 3 months, 2 to 3 months to make a decision and get those decisions out.
And as you I imagine would guess, there'll be a fairly rigorous review process implemented using both these third-party subject matter experts as well as our international panel of judges. So for those of you who maybe were a little bit late to join this webinar, the core team here at the Weston Family Foundation in Toronto is not involved in decision making about which proposals will be approved and to whom funding would be granted. We're here for more design and coordination, logistical support, and it's really all third parties that will be involved in undertaking that adjudication and ultimately making final recommendations on which grants, which projects to support under the auspices of the Homegrown Innovation Challenge. Here, another question that just came in, Lucas, is there a requirement to have a complete solution all the way to crop production, or are contributing technologies eligible too? And the example that was provided is improved growing devices.
Not too sure if I understand that, but I'll try to attempt to answer that. So the pipeline of the different funding rounds really support you going from ideation of kind of an original idea, building it out, testing it, scaling it up. So the solution doesn't have to be fully fleshed out from the beginning. That's what the different funding stages are for, to give you the opportunity to do that. But if I did misunderstand that, please let us know in the chat.
Yeah, I mean, the way I would respond to that is also really, I don't know if there is a good answer. I think the answer, Charles, is refer to the challenge statement. I mean, that's what we're seeking to achieve. That's what we're seeking, the problem we're seeking to address. I suppose if you can do that with a enabling or contributing technology, then that would be considered. Again, I'll pause there. I think we're going through the
Oh, I see Charles just replied back. So I'm thinking about improved lighting. So that would be a component of the overall growing system. So the other aspects would have to be included and fleshed out from the beginning as well. Yeah.
Maybe I'll just make just as we wait for any additional questions to come into the chat box, I might just address a few other points and maybe make a few clarifications. Number one, there was a question about university teams that are composed solely of students and faculty. And I think the answer is you're absolutely eligible to participate and indeed be a principal applicant. But I did want to clarify that what we're seeking really are market-ready systems that are ready for implementation, and as I often say, are ready to start moving the needle vis-a-vis the trade deficit on fruits and vegetables and really make an impact and lower the costs of production, particularly out of season. So, you know, having a solely a university-based team at the beginning, that might be okay for the conceptualization, for proof of concept. But, you know, I think it's going to be hard for just a university-based team to ultimately undertake that scaling and arrive at a market-ready solution. Okay. I think another point of clarification is that I think we said, and this might be my fault, Lucas, I think we said that the berry list is locked down. And that is not entirely true. In fact, if you look at the list of berries on our website, we give some examples, but we specifically say this is a non-exhaustive list, really provided for illustrative purposes. So the list of berries is relatively open-ended. What I think the better answer is that the selection criteria, both the inclusion and the exclusion criteria, are really what are locked down. And indeed, the category of berries is certainly locked down. So that's another just point of clarification I want to bring up. I'm going to go back now to the chat box and see if anything else has come in here. Here's a more of a practical question. Is everyone involved today, and I presume that means from the Weston Family Foundation, going to be included in future communications? Or maybe, I guess the idea, if I interpret this correctly, is are we going to add everyone that participated to our distribution list and keep track of who participated? And I think we will do that inherently to keep track of who's here. And we may also include you in a distribution list. We got to make sure we're doing that in an appropriate way. I would say, though, that if you are very eager to be sure that you're on the distribution list and on our and in our roles, as it were, please do go to the website and drop us a line, enter your information to the application. Another question that came in from Aaron Lucas was about colleges. Are colleges qualified donees, and can they play a lead role in this challenge?
Yeah, absolutely. So they would come under that the registered charities bucket under the CRA, examples of qualified donees. So yes, and if you do want to make sure, there's also a search function on the Government of Canada site to look for qualified donees. So you could take a look and see if your specific institution is in that list. But overall, yes, colleges and universities are qualified donees.
And I think we'll be adding that link to that search function on our website, so you can search if your organization is indeed a registered charity and therefore by definition a qualified donee. So if that's not already uploaded in the frequently asked questions, keep an eye out for it in the coming days. But to be sure, that's really just a link to a government website that we'll be providing. Obviously, it's not for us to make a determination of whether an entity is a qualified donee in our view or not. I don't see anything else coming into the chat box, so maybe we should start to wrap things up. Lucas, any final comments from you? Any points you wanted to underscore before we terminate the webinar?
No, I think just reiterating those deadlines, May 3rd for Spark, December 20th for Shepherd. It's not a prerequisite to apply for Spark to also apply for Shepherd. But to also, if you do have any questions about scope and competitiveness and does your idea fit, really refer back to that challenge statement and kind of, does it support that outcome that we're looking for? I think too, on the team building aspect, we do want to reiterate that we're hoping to support participants and applicants in that sense. Unfortunately, we can't give out too many details on kind of the platforms we're thinking about at the moment. We're still building them out, but we'll definitely keep you in the loop and let you know when they're ready.
Great. We'll wrap up at that point. Just a few parting comments. Again, for more information, please do go to homegrownchallenge.ca, check it out. And if you have questions, you can reach us at challenge at westonfoundation.ca. I also want to remind you that this is the first of 2 webinars. The next one's scheduled for April 13th at 1 p.m. Eastern, and we'll be largely covering the same information we covered today. I guess the possible difference will be that we'll have a different set of frequently asked questions as questions come into our inbox between now and then. So I'll end by thanking you all very much for your interest in this initiative and for participating in the call today and for all your great questions. And thank you very much, Lucas, for leading the charge in presenting today and answering those questions. Once again, we're here to help. This is our role, and our objective is very much to ensure that come May 3rd, we're getting the best quality, the best possible quality and quantity of applications for the Spark Award program and help individuals and companies and researchers build great teams. So please do not hesitate to get in touch with us at any time. Okay, thank you all very much. We hope to speak with you soon. And as I said, if we don't hear from you between now and April 13th, please do join us again if you like on April 13th for more information. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.